Solana has had a strong start to the year with the token rising more than 10% and crossing back above the $140 level. Now, Blockworks data shows the Solana network's real economic value hitting $5.8 million between December 29th and January 4th of this year. Its stablecoin supply spiked last year and has increased in every quarter since Q2 of 2023. Well, joining me as we kick off the new year is Kash Dhanda, COO of Jupiter. Good morning and Happy New Year, Kash. Thank you so much for joining me. So as we kick off 2026, tell me about these Solana trends to watch this year. Is it tokenization, stablecoins, asset issuance, all of the above?
I would definitely say all of the above. I think the biggest problem with Solana is that there's too many kind of bullish narratives happening at the same time. I've been in the ecosystem now for coming up on 5 years, and I've never been more bullish on Solana. And here, of course, I talk about the network, not the token. But I see all of these tailwinds kind of coming together from the network quality itself, its ability to execute fast and cheap transactions, the ecosystem of innovation around it, and then critically, the kind of brand trust that we're seeing. So I think that this is really the year that Solana is able to deliver on that promise of creating real value for real people in the real world. And I think primarily this will happen across two dimensions. The first one is more assets, and the second is more action. Solana, as you briefly mentioned, is leading the way in trading volumes, somewhat staggeringly. Solana has the most trading volume in 2025, more than any other network, and more than any other centralized exchange, with the notable exception of Binance. I think it's about 1.5, $1.6 trillion, of which Jupiter did about half, a little bit more so. And as a result, we're seeing assets come on chain, not just from other networks, things like Zcash, Monad, Near, et cetera, but also from the real world. Things like Prime, which is by figure and is like a tokenized version of a bunch of home equity loans effectively. In addition, though, I think the other major trend from tokenization is also going to be more action, where the rails of Solana are actually getting used in new and important ways. One like little lighthouse case study here is JP Morgan. Some folks might not have heard, but they issued $50 million of commercial paper for Galaxy Digital directly on the Solana blockchain. And Franklin Templeton was among the lead investors there. I think we're going to see way more of that kind of activity happening, where you're seeing crypto be this kind of settlement rails for major financial institutions around the world, let alone dual listing IPOs and many other areas. But that was already too long. I'll stop there because I could go on for a while.
Yeah, and Kash, you mentioned some key names when it comes to financial institutions. So I do want to get your take on appetite when it comes to the institutional side for Solana. We saw plenty of that last year. So what about this year?
I would say it's a good and busy time to be working in the Solana ecosystem. My inbox is constantly full, as I'm sure most people who work in the ecosystems are seeing right now. I think a lot of it is being driven by the kind of trust that's built up through these ETFs. So Solana ETFs recently crossed about $1 billion in total AUM across all of them. And I think that's only going to continue to increase as more players get in the space. I think just today or yesterday, depending on your time zone, Morgan Stanley actually filed for a Solana ETF. They filed for that and a Bitcoin ETF, which I think is a major kind of step forward in sign of trust. But in addition, to this kind of broad awareness and this kind of financial asset, bringing in more awareness, we're seeing more trust of the underlying technology as well. And so you're seeing proof of concepts coming out of many organizations last year. And I think this coming year, we're going to only see that double down like we saw with JP Morgan and some others.
Yeah, and you told us right now about the underlying ecosystem and the technology. So for people who may not be as familiar with Solana, not the token, but the technology, give us an understanding of what's actually happening under the surface.
Yeah, so Solana is a proof of stake blockchain, which basically is a way for these transactions to get recorded. And these transactions can be financial in nature, they can be around the movement of assets, the movement of things that you own on chain. But really, where Solana's edge comes in is in its speed and in its costs, right? So blocks settle in about 400 milliseconds right now. There's an upgrade coming up called Alpenglow, which should bring down that time to 150 milliseconds, which would really be on par with most kind of Web 2 type experiences. And it's very cheap, right? It's whatever 0.0002 cents per transaction or something like that, and that doesn't really spike. It stays very consistent, unlike other ecosystems. And so that reliability and that kind of processing speed that gives you that kind of traditional Web 2 feel is why we're seeing so much adoption of it, and why we're seeing so many applications and businesses being built on Solana. I mean, just last year alone, I think it was about $2.4 billion in revenue earned by Solana protocols who are servicing the users who wanted to come over here. And I think 7 of them did more than $100 million in revenue, including Jupiter.
And finally, Kash, before I let you go, when it comes to trends, when it comes to Solana, not just the technology, but also for the token and innovation, what are your expectations heading into 2026?
I think this is the year that Solana becomes a household name. Right now, my cousin, my aunts, et cetera, they've all heard of Bitcoin and they've started to hear about Solana. And I think that by the end of this year, basically anyone who's attuned to financial markets or to technology is going to be well aware of both what Solana is and why it is so valuable and why it is kind of differentiated from the rest of the class. So this is going to be the year of Solana's kind of coming out party, shall we say.
Okay, Kash, well, thank you so much for joining us as we kick off the full trading week of 2026.
Thanks for having me, Remy. See you soon.